is that there are technical limitations. You know, there are calls that we've heard to simply move it somewhere else, but I haven't heard of a specific location where to move it within the residential zone. And that's the intention, is to make it accessible so that people can walk easily back home to cook their dinner. There are 9 electric poles on the 100 block. 2 are at the ends, so they couldn't accommodate cars charging. 4 others are in front of houses without driveways, so they would take up the spots immediately in front of the house. And so when you look at all of the different poles, I think 1 or 2 were disqualified as part of this process because they didn't meet the technical requirements. So this actually, you know, just with a kind of layperson's eyes walking down the block, this is actually a logical location because it sits in the middle of 2 driveways where there's room for 4 cars to park. And so the staff marked the spots right in the center, allowing each homeowner their own spot to park while allowing 2 cars to charge in the middle. And it's actually the only pole, as I see it, that can accommodate the homeowners to park in front of their homes while people are charging. So there is, I think, just a plainly visible logic to it. I don't see it as arbitrary. I think it was the result of staff, a lot of staff time, a lot of coordination with Pico, with the electricians, and with Flo, the installer. So a lot of thought has gone into it. I regret that the new neighbors were not notified. That was a mistake. But I think it's worth turning on the charger and to see how it works as a pilot. Thank you.
All right, let's now move on to online public comment. If anybody who's online wishes to make a comment, please raise your hand, and then our assistant manager will start calling names. We're working on it. We've got a technical difficulty right now, so let's pause for a second. Meanwhile, since the recording started a little late, I will note that there had been no action taken except for public comment at the meeting. Okay, so I think we are back. So if you are online and you wish to make a public comment, please raise your screen.
Fred, you're back to some weird whiteboard. There you go. Now you're off.
Okay.
I'm removing this person because they keep sharing their screen. I'm not sure what that's about, so.
Just block them from sharing. Okay.
Yeah. I love Zoom.
Okay, so can we call some names? Are there people with hands up?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you? I mean, I find it hard to read from over here.
Carol Murray, you want to go first?
Yes, that would be fine. I just want to make note that the recording did not start until after public comment, and Amy and Kevin's comments were not now on the public record. And that's kind of important because this is an issue being discussed tonight, and it's also a real hotbed issue. So I'd like to make that known that their comment, do they need to remake their comment? That's an important issue. And as we're talking about the EV station.
For the minutes, Carol Murray, we'll note it in the minutes, and we apologize for the public, we didn't realize the recording was on. So once we did, we turned it on. The key record for the state is the minutes, and everybody's public comment will be reflected in the minutes.
Typically, okay. The public comment just says Carol Marie Scanlon made a public comment. It's not dictated what the comment was, and their comment was very valuable for this topic. Now, as I talk with my public comment, with the EV stations, they're municipal stations, you've said, and municipal and commercial are about the same thing. So they really need to be in a commercial district. And as Rob was saying that, there are other places to put it, sounds like 149 might be a nice place to put it because it's a wider area of the street. You're familiar with the street. It's a wider area of the street that they want it. They're excited about it. Might be a good spot to put it. Now, I want to ask you about the RFP for Sabine, because at the end of last year, you had said, Fred, several times that it was going to be early in 24, that the RFP for the development at Sabine Park is going to be put out. When is that going to be put out in 2024?
You'll see it on the agenda. There's been no change in that.
All right. And then with fungi, is that a borough entity?
Fungi is
Friends of
an
Friends.
independent entity.
So I'm wondering, did the borough pay Mr. Wacko to set that up? Was that part of our legal bills?
He assisted in the setup. I don't remember if he did it pro bono or if we paid for his time. I'm not sure. We
Right,
can look
not
into
to
it.
interrupt, but since this is public comment and not Q&A, I can invite Ms. Scanlon to email me as former chair of F&A. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's, again, not a time during public comment, but I'm happy to answer that if you want to email me, Carol Marie.
Well, I will, but it's also important for the public to know that that is a question, because as I was looking at the legal, Mr. Wacko's legal bill, it seemed that fungi was in it. So that's a big question for the public and the use of public funds for other than public needs.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Again, I can't read the screen. So.
Christine Copeland.
Yes. Yes. Hello. I live at 119 Marion, right next to the Marion EV charger. And I wanted to speak in deep support for it. As the brand new owner of a new electric vehicle that enabled me to work a little bit more far abreast, but in a climate conscious way without having to buy a combustion engine vehicle. I have had this electric vehicle now for 4 months, and actually the charger put in at South Essex was the really increased allowed us to even consider getting an EV because we do not have a driveway. And I want to address a couple things that people are talking about. And one is that about community and safety. And one thing that maybe so these EV chargers are level 2 EV chargers, which is a very slow charge. So you have to leave your car there for at least 5 hours. You have all of your code, all of your information has to go in there. There is zero safety concerns. The only people using these chargers are your neighbors. And one of the wonderful things is around the EV charging station on South Essex, I've met my neighbors and I've met a variety of people who have been thrilled and been able to get new electric vehicles because of these stations. And we are eagerly awaiting the one to turn on near 119 Marion. Because the one at South Essex is actually starting to get full, and we've had kind of a little slightly like last minute issues where we can't get an EV charger. And lastly, I think that these are not necessarily appropriate or not inappropriate for residential areas where we have a lot of non-driveway. And the other thing too, I have seen absolutely no impact on parking. There is plenty of parking. I never have a problem finding a parking space on 119 Marion ever. So I don't know. I don't think that's a concern. There is no safety issues. These are, you have to go. The people who are going to use these charging stations are your neighbors, the people you know, like the one that's at 127 will be me, and hello neighbors. And please come and talk to us if there's any issues. So I just, again, I would really hate to see it being relocated, and we will use it frequently. I think there's actually a capacity need for it. And the other thing too is when it's 25 degrees out or colder, walking to downtown through the tunnel and then also having to walk back there in the morning to pick up your car to go to work. I prefer it a little bit closer because that improves the access, because these are not DC fast chargers where you can only charge for 20 minutes. They're charges where you have to leave your car for 5 hours. You have to walk and come back.
All right, thank you.
Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is it Artie Kaluri?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Starting my video up.
You can go ahead. Yep.
All right, I'm Artie Kalori, and I wish I could be there in person. I co-own 103 Marion Avenue, and I'm here today to communicate my views on the matter of the EV charger located on my street. The loudest voices tend to drown out other perspectives, regardless of the truth or popularity of their position. I may not have the loudest voice, but it's become abundantly clear to me that I must voice my support for improving the public infrastructure in Narberth, particularly the recent installation on Marion Avenue. I believe the council has the right and, in fact, the obligation to improve public infrastructure. The charger, as my neighbors have said, is located at an ideal midpoint. It's accessible to residents who are unable to add a charger in their own home. I encourage that everyone consider the issue at hand rather than continuing to delay the activation of the charger based on procedural grounds. I believe the installation of the charger in commercial areas and appropriate residential areas will encourage electric vehicle adoption and reduce air pollution over time. In fact, my husband and I, he'll speak later, we considered acquiring an EV after learning about the EV program in neighbors. As a brown person, I'm really alarmed by some of the language of the EV charger opposition. At one time, the most vocal voices made arguments that the charger will attract quote unquote strangers to the area. Recently, even today, there was a suggestion from the faction that moving the charger would benefit equity. So I'll pose this question. Can you really be a proponent of equity if you're fearful of strangers on your street?
All right, please direct your comments to council rather than anybody else.
Sure. I'll close with this. Rather than allowing the loudest voices to get their way, I urge the council to keep the public interest at the forefront.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else online?
Sorry, I'm a Teams guy, so I'm just using my wife's account, but for different people. So my name is Dave Frankenfield. I live at 103 Marion Avenue. I previously attended a committee meeting to voice support for the EV charger recently installed on Marion Avenue, and I've joined the full council meeting tonight to urge you to arrange for the charger to be activated as soon as possible for the benefit of current and would-be EV owners living on and around Marion Avenue. I believe the council chose an ideal location for a public EV charger since many homes on our street lack driveways, which has already been pointed out, leaving homeowners unable to install a charger of their own. Even for those with driveways, I'm confident that having the availability of a conveniently located public charger will encourage adoption of EVs by removing the hassle of installing costly home electrical upgrades. In fact, when my wife and I were considering our next vehicle purchase, knowing there would be a charger just a few houses down made the case to go EV that much more compelling. So, driving by the charger each day and seeing that it has yet to be activated has been very disappointing for me and for like-minded neighbors who support having it on our street, not all of whom have the ability or the time to attend weeknight council meetings. I understand there has been ongoing opposition voiced by some of my other neighbors, the most vocal of whom have shown tremendous creativity in coming up with ever more inventive arguments against placing the charger where it is. Whatever the merits or the motivations underlying those concerns, I urge the council to weigh them against the substantial public benefits that will be lost if the charger is not activated promptly. And that's where I would like to also remind the council that your ultimate duty is to serve the interests of the Narberth community as a whole, which I'm certain will benefit greatly from the activated and fully operational EV charger on Marion Avenue. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, is that it for folks who are online?
I think so.
All right, does anybody who just came into the room wish to make a public comment this time?
I have my hand up.
Go ahead.
Hi, it's Lawrence Goldberg from 200 Sabine. I wanted to focus on the cost element for the EV charger. Could you let me know? And I realize that you probably don't have this information now, but an accurate and comprehensive reckoning of the entire cost of this project so far. So it would be the installation cost not covered by the grant, and I understand that some of the grant, some of the locations were not reimbursed by the grant. So whatever the district's portion is, all of the legal costs involved for any legal action that involved the district solicitor, administrative costs, and the right to know requests involved in it. And I'd like to get a sense of what these are costing the taxpayers each. And I'd ask everyone to look at that going forward. If you're in a budget crisis, as you appear to be, and you're looking for ways to manage costs, I think at a minimum, the public should know, are they costing 10 grand each? Are they costing 12 grand? If you factor in all those factors, what's the total amount? The other thing I'd like to ask is, on the same vein, they're supposed to be, the rates are supposed to be based on the district cost for electricity. So I'd like to know, is anybody actually monitoring that? And for example, the rates, I believe, go up in the winter. Were the rates adjusted? And has any consideration been given to possibly building in a buffer of a certain percentage above cost, just to cover the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance costs, so it actually would be a wash and not something that's effectively being subsidized for the drivers? Thank you.
All right. I don't think we have all that information at this time to talk about at our information item, but at a later time. Sure. At a later time. Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Okay. I'm going to close public comment, and we will move on to our presentation item 8A, which is an update on the bridge.
Hello.
So
I'm Jim Markham with Canoni. We're the design engineers, consultants for the borough on the bridge. Been here a number of times over the last 18 months, updating on the bridge. You've seen we have the bi-weekly meetings with your staff. I believe in your packet was the one from 2 weeks ago. We met Tuesday this week. And included is the schedule that tends to be the hot topic here, right? So on the schedule, the let date is about 2.5 months further out than it was last time I was here in August. We had in there, we discussed last time the risks to the schedule being largely PICO and Amtrak. We had in a date for the PICO design being completed, provided by PICO, that has not yet been met. They're about 3 months behind on that. So it is pushing back the other elements of the schedule where that is a precedent on the schedule for it. The latest, we know they're working on it. They have asked us for information from time to time over the last month and a half to inform their design, most recently on the 19th of January. And we expect to get their design next week. That's not the end. We have to make sure the design works with the bridge and PennDOT agrees it works with the bridge. Like, there's still some checking to be done, but that's in our control and in PennDOT's control. PennDOT has been very responsive. So once it's in our hands, we'll have the control back. Now we might have to ask them to change something or not. Hopefully not, because they've asked a lot of good questions along the way. But that is the thing on the schedule at the moment, the critical path, as we call it. You'll also note on this schedule, there's more green than there was last time. You know, we keep checking the boxes with PennDOT that can be checked. Some can't be checked until the PICO design is finalized. For example, constructability review. They'll really want to know, how is the design working with the PICO design? That's an important part of constructability. We won't be able to check that box until that point. So PICO remains the critical path. It is affecting the overall schedule. I'm hoping that we have their design in hand next week and we can continue checking the boxes. That's really the update on the schedule. We've advanced a number of other things. The next thing that will be into the borough, we've finalized our part of the power supply for the architectural lighting. We've had the architectural design, but we needed to know a little more about what PICO was doing so we could power the lights on the bridge. So we have that. That should be in tomorrow, actually. I don't think we need the finalized PICO design to have that review started in the borough and with PennDOT. Amtrak had requested some changes to the traction power. That's the catenary wires, which we've made quickly and resubmitted to Amtrak. That's in their hands. Big picture, you know, the boxes are all getting checked. The current box that's driving the schedule is the PICO box. Optimistic about it next week, and we'll keep moving forward and checking the boxes.
Are we still having trouble with Norfolk Southern, or has that been sorted out?
Yeah. Yes, we're still having Norfolk Southern. PennDOT is completely aware of it. They realize that Norfolk Southern is a tenant on the Amtrak line, and they're not going to stop the project. Normally, you would want the tenants to sign the tenant form for utility clearance. Norfolk Southern said they're not going to sign it. We have the documentation that they're not going to sign it, and PennDOT seems to think we can just move forward with them refusing to sign it. So are they still being difficult? Yes. Is it slowing things down? I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, I have concerns here, but your legal counsel has looked this over and agrees with PennDOT that not having them on this.
We've not asked our legal counsel to review PennDOT's decision on the PennDOT forms now.
I guess fair enough. It's a PennDOT form and PennDOT said it's okay.
Yeah.
They're the ultimate authority. Okay. I mean, part of this is that, you know, we have several new council members, and
yeah,
given the importance of the bridge project, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of, you know, how things were moving and what the process is looking like. So, if anybody wants to.
I mean, we get asked, I'm one of those new people, we get asked, you know, I know guys, you can't commit to a date, but do we have a sort of expected range of when we can actually commence construction or pre-construction? I guess pre-construction first.
Yeah, so if you look at the bottom of the schedule that's in the agenda, it has...
I'm just asking for the public's sake.
Oh.
Not for my sake.
Yeah, I didn't bring the schedule with me, but it's later this year. Yeah.
December 9th, 2024, anticipated contractor notice to proceed.
I mean, it's an improvement. It's been like a year and a half out for the last 5 or 6 years, and now it is 11 months out, which is, you know, closer, but. Okay. 10 even, depending on how you calculate it. Advertising the project is kind of the key date for us, so maybe 8 months out from advertising.
Is there a projection of how long the construction will take once it does start?
We've done that. I don't know the answer.
18 to 24 months.
I would guess closer to the 24 because of the Amtrak coordination, but I don't recall.
And will it allow for pedestrian and bike access during the construction?
Yes.
So,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Cindy.
So we've been here before with the dates and the adjusted schedule, and I often get the community and we share that it's PICO. And the next question is, what tools for advocacy are you using to promote this, to move this along with PICO? How would you answer that? How do you suggest we communicate what you're doing to advocate for Narberth to our neighbors?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but if you're asking what is Pannoni doing to advocate for the project, we're following up with PICO on a regular basis, saying, you have this date coming up in a week, where are we at? And then they'll tell us it's not going to happen next week. We have the bi-weekly meetings with the borough staff, and the borough, when needed, has been asked to help contact PICO if we need to. And PennDOT has the utility unit that deals with PICO all over District 6. And we've been working with them to help when needed with any of the utilities. So those are really our tools. We don't work at PICO, so we can't actually make PICO do things, but we're following up pretty vigorously. I said we have the bi-weekly meetings with the borough. We have the weekly meetings at Pannoni and ask that very question. What else can we at Pannoni do to drive this forward? So the next step after any of the utilities is with the PUC. We got someone specifically at Pannoni with recent history with the PUC to make sure all those boxes are checked. So as soon as we have the PICO approvals and designs we need, that should be as fast and as smooth as possible. So even though PICO is a precedent to that on the schedule, we're greasing the schedule for the things after that. So
Okay, no, that answers my question. So I can now tell people this is this is not resting on our laurels. This is not waiting. There are weekly, there are bi-weekly, to Mike's point. Thank you.
All right, anytime, yes.
So I read this whole thing, and the part of it that gives me the most pause, believe it or not, because it's funny to give you pause, is this business about Amtrak only being able to support one bridge replacement at a time.
Yeah, that's what Amtrak says.
Okay. Could you give us a little more insight into that, perhaps? Or,
yeah,
because I guess if we're going to have to push a button at some point to exert, pressure on people, that's going to be the part of it that's going to require it.
We've discussed that very specifically at the last two meetings we have with the borough, that at some point there's going to be potentially, depending on when Amtrak decides to put us on their schedule, there might be a political action that would help. We don't want to ask you to do that while PICO is hanging out there. So for example, if you decided to talk to Senator Casey and he does something and learns that we're waiting for PICO anyway, that just feels like bad timing on the part of the borough, right?
Yeah.
So we're still trying to check all the boxes, but there may be an ask, a political ask at some point. Sure.
Right, but this was, Cindy, because you may not have gotten into all this detail, but under 1D, there's this whole section about this, and I think that's when we're going to need the help. More so with PICO, because this is a big potential problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to have on our radar. I mean, it's bad to have on our radar. Better than having it come unknown to us.
I guess there's no political pressure to bear on PICO, which seems to be consistently holding us up?
I can't answer that.
But he's not recommending it, unlike for Amtrak. Okay. Any other questions?
You know, hey, I've,
You're in those bi-weekly meetings, so.
I am, and if I could just chime in and just say that, you know, I have a unique perspective and that I was in these meetings when I was here 2.5 years ago. And the meetings that we're having now are a lot more action-oriented than those meetings that we had in the past. And I just wanted to commend Pannoni for not resting on their laurels, and that they are, the borough and Pannoni are not the issues here. Every time we get something, anytime Pannoni gets something, it's turned around, if not that same day, within that same week. And so this is, you know, we're always stuck in this vicious cycle of being on the receiving end of these huge bureaucracies that have their own systems that you have to, that there is no wiggle room in. And so we're constantly waiting. I could forward you every single email from the borough solicitor to Amtrak. I think it's about, we're on a weekly basis now, nudging them, hey, have you had a chance to review this? Hey, have you had a chance to review this? Hey, have you had a chance to review this? What more can you do, right? It's frustrating. I share the frustration, but I don't want that frustration to be focused on the borough's engineer right now, because they really are working on, you know, to help us navigate this, arguably one of the most complicated infrastructure projects in southeastern PA. This little bridge with every single utility attached to it, with every, you know, each one of them having their own process to work through. It's a lot to navigate, right? And so then the other thing that happens when we get a review, when we submit something, we get a review, and then they have suggested changes. That changes, that just continues to extend the review time. So I am encouraged. This is the closest we've gotten that I've seen. I know it seems like we're inching forward, but it's coming. And so much so that the financing part of it is keeping me up a little bit. And you know, currently we're at 80-15-5, 80% federally funded, 15% state, 5% local. So we're on the hook for 5%. One of the issues that we have to, one of the issues that the solicitor is trying to get an answer from Amtrak on is this 30% down payment requirement from Amtrak. If you looked at the current Pannoni estimate for the cost of this bridge, that 30% down payment would almost equal the entire annual operating budget for the borough. So we can't do that, right? And so that's another thing that is outstanding. There's these other tasks that we need answers to, that we're hoping to get some better answers that will help turn down the temperature a bit.
I do want to say, you know, Mr. Markham, since you've been involved in the project, things have gotten a lot more clear and, as Matt says, more action-oriented. So, you know, I think council, and me in particular, would be prickly at these meetings, but I do appreciate the focus you're bringing to this project.
Thank you very much.
Well, we were nicer to you tonight than
It's our frustration
with the
delays in general that are percolating through, I would say.
And you know, just to continue, just to finish that thought, these weekly meetings aren't just the borough and Jim. It's Jim and Jesse from Pannoni, and we have two representatives representing PennDOT on these calls every 2 weeks. And they are the ones who are helping us navigate capital projects. And so we're going right to the source, and they have been invaluable. That hadn't happened, you know, when I was here 8.5 years ago. So we are doing our best to move this thing along as quickly as possible.
I should just say Jesse is also online for this meeting. So.
Further questions?
Well, I mean, does Jesse know the schedule, the project duration, or is that too hard to predict?
Jesse maintains the schedule, so yeah.
No, I meant
the construction schedule.
Oh, the construction schedule. Well, Jesse, do you know that construction schedule offhand? For duration, I guess?
we had a draft compiled, but we received several comments from PennDOT with their constructability review. And one of the comments was to address PECO's latest design, which we still don't have in hand. So we're near, but not quite at a point where we can provide an updated duration there. I have several documents open. The construction schedule is not one that I have open right now. So I cannot answer that question, but I think the 24 months duration that you threw out is probably the safest bet of the range that was given.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get that updated for our next time we have this on the agenda. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time. Let's move on to our consideration items. 9A. I think we need a motion here. This is the consideration item for Barbara Thornton audit support. Someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'd like to move to approve the personal services contract with Borough Thornton and Company to provide financial audit support and monthly accounting services.
Second?
Second.
Okay, seconded. Wonderful. Let's, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this action in front of council this evening for consideration is to hire Barbara Thornton and Company to help the borough staff get prepared for the annual audit. Our annual auditor, B. Bergvall, they need to maintain their third-party status, their outside status while they perform their audit. So they cannot perform these same functions. And so it's important for us to have a certified CPA connected to our staff to be able to review our books. It'll be a much more effective investment for them to come in and help us prepare for the audit than us trying to do it during the audit. Additionally, if you remember during budget season, I recommended that the borough engage in a CPA to help us on a monthly basis to do a one day a month review once all of the bank recs are done, the reconciliations, to just review it, make sure we're on track. Yes, that looks good. That's just a good fail-safe for us. As we've had a lot of turnover in the office, it just gives us another resource to make our finances that much more in line with the expectations of the audit. So I'm recommending that the council award this contract, and Barbara Thornton has actually been working with the borough. When we did the RFP to select an auditor back when I was here, way back when, they actually, I believe, they ranked number 2 outside from Barbara Thornton. So they've been in the borough, they've been working with the borough since 2021, and so this is just a continuation.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt, but someone's taking control of the screen again. Okay, so you can hit a setting where participants can't take control.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that though. It's the issue.
If you want to make me a co-host, I'm happy to play around with it. Okay.
I got one of them.
Okay, apologize. All right, so Barbara Thornton, they've worked with us in the past. We have a budget line item for professional services, exactly this sort of thing. Any other questions or comments from council?
Well, I just add one thing that we also have not added. We have a budget for an additional staff member that we have not added yet, wisely, because they're trying to decide what the right role is. So that is somewhat budget relieving in the sense that we budgeted for that position for a full year, right?
Yeah.
Half year.
Half year.
Oh, half year. Okay, well, so maybe I'm wrong, but nonetheless, it's worth noting that we're not at full staff.
Okay.
I guess I'll just point out that Michael and Jim and I were at the new Borough Council boot camp last Friday and Saturday. One of the things that really impressed upon us is the importance of having the financial controls in place good auditing procedures, good accounting procedures, et cetera. We are as people like to say on our screen, we are the keepers of the fisc, and I think that this is really an important element, and there's no way that I would not be part of that. So I absolutely believe we should have the CPAs come in looking over our shoulders.
All right. That's slightly creeping up. We're voting to approve a professional services contract with Barbara Thornton and Company for audit, support, and accounting services. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Let's move on to 9B, 80 Windsor roof reinforcement. Is there a motion?
Motion to motion to award the 80 Windsor Avenue roof reinforcement project bid. Do we need to specify which?
Option B, option also to ATU services.
I'll motion for option B.
Okay, and you need to name the company? Yeah, so name the company that's there.
To ATU services.
Sorry, not finding the page in the backup. ATU, yeah, sorry, ATU services. I heard you say that in my head. I was thinking you were saying something completely different.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And I would also add to the motion to not award option C and D, which was the repair of existing cracks and repainting.
We didn't mention C or D, so like they're probably not. Okay. Do we need to? Okay, I mean, do you wish to amend your motion to say that we're not
to say that we are not awarding C or D.
Okay. Yeah, take a second for that.
So let's take a bit.
Okay, do we need to vote on amending the motion?
No.
All right. So, we're talking about awarding option B and not options C and D, all right? So Matt, talk to us about this situation.
Okay, yes. So this is one of these projects that I came in 3/4 of the way through. My understanding is this project came to light several years ago, compounded by something that happened in 2021 with a ceiling failure in the library that the borough's code inspector was involved in, and we have Nick Cirilli, owner of Yerkes Associates, who is the borough's code enforcement officer. Through that, we discovered that some significant support projects needed to happen in all three of the wings of 80 Windsor. Talking about the library, what's affectionately known as the Girl Scout room, and the Legion room. This was discussed at previous infrastructure meetings where we talked about the design. There was a structural engineer who I believe is on the call, who worked for a different firm at the time, who's now also back on the project, who designed a rather impressive system to support the roof. The roof is failing. In order for us to move forward, I think we've got two options. Go forward with the repair as provided in this bid. The other option is to remove the roof completely and rebuild the roof. Estimates at least $1.5 million to do that. Option 3, raise the building and build a brand new one. I don't think those two are on the table, right? And so while I am not too thrilled with investing $500,000 in a repair project, it is a vital repair project that needs to be done. And so in order for council to be in a position to feel comfortable about awarding this bid, I've asked Nick Cirilli to be in attendance tonight, to be available to answer any questions, provide any other updates as needed. We also have our structural engineer on the call, as well as our borough engineer. If you have any questions about this bid and how it relates to similar bids in the universe of capital construction bids. So, Nick, do you have anything other than that I didn't say that you'd like to touch on?
No, the project, Jonathan is on the call, the structural engineer. This problem arose about 10 years ago. And when Jonathan was with another firm, did a structural model, and the model showed that the entire building was deficient structurally as far as the support system, the rafters of the roof and the joists of the roof. In fact, there are 5 split systems in that whole building system. So Jonathan broke the design down into what I'm going to call the east wing, the center of the library, and the west wing. And we did, it's a series of putting 4 interior trusses, and they're going to be architecturally pleasing to fit into the interior design of the actual building. And each of these trusses are going to support and grab the older system. And then the option B is to turn the entire building over to the contractor, saving us about $14,000 or $15,000, and also a savings in time. 10 weeks to do it if we turn over the entire building to the contractor, or versus option A, which was to do one wing or section at a time, which would have been a 16-week project. So we're picking the least cost and the least time element project.
Thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that. That was a big aspect of this, the decision to award option B. I met with representatives of the Narberth Community Library this week and discussed this project, whether there was merit in doing the original option A, which was doing the segmented approach. Our understanding was that the library wanted to keep some sort of accessibility, to keep library operations open. But as we talked to the library, they're confident that they are going to be able to, they proved it during COVID, to be able to maintain library operations through the children's wing, which is the rear of the building, which is not covered under this project, and will be able to help patrons through the back door, calling your orders. They'll be able to bring books out to residents and patrons. And so they were in support of awarding option B also. That enables us to minimize operational costs, so mobilization costs, that we can bring in an entire crew to work on the entire space all at once. So 10 weeks versus 16 weeks, cost savings, library is on board. I'm pretty confident that, that in our recommendation to council.
Does anybody else on the call want to make any contribution? Okay.
And I also did include the plan set in the meeting packet this evening if you wanted to visualize what it's going to look like. There are architectural engineering plan sets in there. They will be visible when you walk into these rooms. You're going to see it's going to be like you're in a ski lodge. You know, you're going to see the exposed trusses.
They already have the fireplace. So.
Right?
How long is this project good for? I mean, if we put these...
So it'll bring the useful life of the project up to the useful life of the building structurally.
Okay.
What it doesn't do is your normal maintenance of an old building doesn't go away. If you have rotted fascia or trim and things like that, that doesn't go away. The contractor's been in business 43 years. He's done library roofs in Delaware County. I've known him about 20 years, and I would say he's qualified to do this work. And so we don't have a problem with the contractor.
Yeah, so I would be, I think, remiss if I didn't bring up a topic that came up at the infrastructure meeting where we discussed this project, and that is there's another approach. It's not the preferred approach, but it's to fix the worst parts first, and then circle back and do the others later. It's going to cost more to do it that way, and it's going to disrupt the space twice. So the infrastructure committee felt like that wasn't a great option, but I just wanted to mention it here because it was, part of our recommendation. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, thank you for reminding me. That is right. We are seeing astronomical prices today. Maybe Eric can talk about his roof in another municipality. if, let's just say we do the library phase one, and then next year, the east wing, and the year after that, the west wing, you're looking at 3 mobilization costs, plus any inflationary costs. So you won't be getting the best bang for your total building buck. And it'll be spread out. Now, the building is not in imminent danger. It certainly is an option. However, if we did go that route, and Jonathan can attest, if there's any snow loads, we would have to shut the building down because it's under snow load that the structural models show a failure in the structural system itself. So we don't recommend that option. We recommend getting it done despite the high costs that we're seeing.
Yeah, so this did come in higher than our bid estimates. Let me just go with this. So I think, Eric, you were suggesting that you'd been seeing kind of that across the board with a lot of similar bids, a lot of similar projects.
Yes, I actually, across various municipalities, actually, we're putting a new roof on another borough, and the prices came in well in excess of budgetary numbers as well. And I'm actually, for another project, I've been tracking roofing costs over the past 10 years or so, and it's going up. So staggering the project, as Nick is alluding to, you have the structural concerns, but you're not going to save money in the future.
And you also feel that rebidding is just not going to change the dynamics, that we're still going to end up with very high bids and just delay the project.
You have, if it's the same project, you're not changing the scope. You have the same bidders either come back or not bid again. But if it's a change of scope, I don't see it. If it's not a change of scope, I don't see a change in cost.
Cindy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm glad that F&A discussed that, because I think it's a responsibility to ask, what do we have to do now, and can we delay projects? And I really appreciate your answer, because we have inherited decades of deferred maintenance. And this is a huge price tag, unexpected price tag for nothing kind of new. In other words, it's not a new amenity, or it's nothing new and shiny to the community. And yet I think as a council, for us to defer that to future councils is irresponsible. And it puts our future colleagues in the position we are now of really being overwhelmed with deferred maintenance. So I'm glad we're all in agreement that this is an investment that we're doing now, and not continuing that practice of deferred maintenance until we get to a crisis.
It seems like it's a strong recommendation from our borough manager, as well as professional consultants, that we move forward with this.
Yeah, I don't like spending $500,000 on an unbudgeted item, but it's the right thing to do.
I mean, this has been on the radar for like so many years, and I definitely support getting it done as soon as possible. I do want to at least explore the option. What is the risk? Well, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. I know there's some grant funding available for library roof replacements and things like that. And so that might be able to recoup up to 50% of the cost.
Yeah, we talked about that. We did. And the issue is a timing issue. And so unfortunately, the specific grant that would apply to this project has a fall opening and closing, and we had just missed it.
Right.
I think it closed in September, October timeframe. And so we discussed, okay, what if we reject the bid, delay it so we can apply for a grant? There's no guarantee that we'll get a grant.
Right.
That's the end of 2024. Award early 2025, if you're lucky. So we're looking at mid to late 2025, early 2026 for construction. It didn't sit right with me. Yes, it would be helpful financially, but if we're talking about putting restrictions on a roof if it snows, that doesn't make me feel comfortable, which is why we talked about it amongst staff and professionals, and we just didn't feel comfortable prolonging this.
But there's maintenance on this building. We're talking about the structural stability and integrity. There is a ton of maintenance, and to the point about deferred maintenance, you're absolutely right. It is a problem with all infrastructure. Deferring maintenance 1 year, the costs are multiplicative, up to 10 times the cost. And there's an example of a pothole, a pothole deferred, a $2,500 pothole becomes a $6,000 pothole the following year. So it's really, really smart to shed the culture of deferred maintenance. But maybe there's the trim, there's the exterior of the building. There's quite a bit of work that maybe can be grant qualified.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do on that library.
All right, and just in the short term, we have the capacity to deal with this financially.
It'll be tight, but I'm confident that we'll be able to do it. We've got some grant funding coming in from other sources that should be here within 4 to 8 weeks, which is right in time for this one.
Okay, it's grant reimbursement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any costs associated with the library staying open, like operationally? Will they need extra electricity? Like, can they have electricity on while the work is going on?
They
need
can.
extra insurance, perhaps?
Shouldn't, because there's not going to be any access to the work zone. It'll be completely segregated. They'll be working out of the children's wing. There'll be some sort of cover. I don't think it's a hard cover, but it'll be noisy for them, a little uncomfortable. But we're confident.
But so let's say we approve this now. When would the work occur?
Looking at mid-March start time.
So, March, April, and part of May, I guess. Yeah, March 15th to April 15th, to May 15th.
Yes.
I think it's worth pointing out the other bid was $200,000 higher. Since we've been criticized for only getting one bid on the trash, I think it's worth pointing out that actually we got 2 bids here, and there's a very substantial difference in the scope of work. Any sense of why, the first bid that we accepted is a little higher than our budget, but any sense of why there was such a disparity in the bids?
We had 5 inquiries. Obviously, only 2 submitted the bid. It simply is the market. They're picking and choosing. That's the only thing I can think of. We're not getting 4 and 5 bidders, and that would be nice if you get 3, so you got 3 data points. We're just not getting that. Maybe Eric can attest to that too. And or if you are getting 4 or 5, you got to look at the qualifications of those other bidders.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So seeing no more comment, we're voting to approve the 80 Windsor Avenue roof reinforcement project bid. Option B, not options C and D for ATU. All those in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. All right, information items. Okay, so 10A is the residential EV charging stations. If you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I want to talk a little about the process that got us here. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
For the meeting, and thanks for everyone who's attending online. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the process that got us here and moving forward. So the council over the last 5 or 6 years has been very active on environmental issues. It's something we've campaigned about. We've been very public about it. I think everybody who's been on the campaign trail in the primary has been talking about our focus on green initiatives, and it's really come through with a number of different projects and plans. Just concretely, you can see the green stormwater bump outs. There's some bike infrastructure at Station Circle. We acquired the green space at 3 Elmwood to preserve from development. All of this came with grant support because I think the county and the state kind of share some of our interests in green infrastructure. Right now, we're working on a master park plan and in cooperation with Lower Merion on a multimodal transportation plan, all of which are also coming with grant support. We've waived our internal fees on solar installations. We've made some changes to code to support bike parking in new construction and clean energy in new construction. There's really a lot of green initiatives that have been coming through council, and we've received a silver accreditation through Sustainable PA, which tracks sort of a lot of municipal level initiatives, and it sort of shows our focus on things. In 2019, we passed a Ready for 100 resolution committing the borough to renewable energy by 2030, and renewable electricity by 2030, I should say, and renewable energy for heat and transportation by 2040. And I noted that Matt West, in his role as Borough Secretary at the time, actually signed this resolution. So we're actually on track for our goals for renewable electricity. We are working on a community choice aggregation project that we have high hopes for. But heat and transportation, trying to get the community to transition to renewable heating and transportation is difficult. It's a challenge, and we're trying to set the rules for new construction to encourage all electric heating as part of the process. But transportation, people's cars are a tricky thing, right? Everybody, we've all got this built-out gasoline automobile infrastructure. And while pretty soon, in a lot of states, you won't be able to buy a gasoline vehicle. Like I know that New Jersey and Delaware have set rules for 100% electric sales in the state in 5 years. I mean, it's a relatively near horizon where you won't be able to buy a gas vehicle in several states surrounding here. And ultimately, we're all going to have electric vehicles. It's just a question of how we get to a point where we can support that infrastructure. I mean, there's gas stations throughout the country, so it's, if you have a gas car, you have no question you're going to be able to fill up your vehicle and get moving no matter where you are. With electrics, there's a whole term called range anxiety. You get nervous about whether you're going to be able to charge your car. So we've had various plans and proposals to deal with this. So Norbert did a comprehensive plan in 2019. Miriam, I know you worked on that, and Todd, I think you were involved as well in the comp plan. The comp plan has a nice picture of an electric vehicle charging station in a parking lot. And it says that increasing availability of these types of charging ports could provide incentives for residents and visitors to switch from a petroleum-based vehicle to an alternative fuel vehicle. We published a climate action plan in 2020. And again, it talked about public charging stations as being increasingly understood as critical for more widespread adoption of electric vehicles. So in 2021, the borough acquired its first chargers. We put them in the borough parking lot and one on, which one we did? The North Essex one, one on Essex by the 100 block of Essex. These were acquired from Flow. They were partly grant supported, and they've been seeing increasing use. So the charger in the borough parking lot allowed the borough to start transitioning its own fleet of vehicles from gas vehicles to electric, and we continue to continue that change. I think we were among the first boroughs to have electric police cars. They seem pretty happy with them. We've added more chargers kind of as situations seem to warrant, and again, typically with grant support. So we added another one to the borough lot, another one to the downtown. They're a very safe and mature technology at this point, and over the 3 years that we've had chargers operating, Neither the police nor borough staff have reported any hazardous incidents relating to these chargers. We talk about, well, we don't know if these are safe. Well, we do. We've had them in place for several years now, and nothing has happened. I mean, I've looked online, and there are a few injuries that people have related to electric chargers. It's them tripping over the cord, like at their house. Those are the only, there's a half dozen of those over the last few years. And there's millions of chargers throughout the United States at this point. So, I mean, mostly private chargers, but nonetheless, these are a very common technology. And they've proven quite safe. So, moving beyond these downtown chargers, here's another statement from our climate action plan. The borough should pursue additional opportunities to install charging stations, support businesses who would like to install their own charging stations, and provide ways for residents to install chargers at homes that lack off-street parking. So already, 4 years ago, it was recognized that this was going to be an issue. I think everybody knows all the Narberth streets that just don't have driveways, or renters who don't have control over their parking lot and may not be able to install a charger if they'd like to. So we have a lot of residents who just don't have that ability to install a charging station. And as a result, this brings us to the present issue, we were able to partner with Flow once again on a pilot program for residential, municipal, and this means borough-owned and public chargers. This is a relatively new concept nationwide. I mean, unlike, sort of chargers in parking lots, there are, a lot of municipalities that are having the same issue we are, that are looking into this and trying to figure out how to site this and how to support, their residents who don't have access to their own garage or their own driveway to install a charger. So in our case, council approved the concept of 3 residential chargers, one on the north side, since there's more, all the chargers before that were already on the north side, and 2 on the south side. And then staff worked on the locations, looking primarily at technical details. So the way our chargers are set up, you need an electric pole, as Rob McGreevy explained, an electric pole near 2 parking spaces, and only certain electrical poles worked. I'm not sure why, but we had several locations that we thought looked good that were ruled out for technical reasons. The borough looked at installing these near multifamily housing, since residents may not be able to install a charger if they want to. However, there was only one suitable spot on the south side in front of a multifamily residence. And it was determined that even with that installation, there was likely to be unmet need for chargers there. Since there are so many houses without driveways on the south side. I think north side houses more commonly have their own driveways. And I think we've heard that with some of the public comment. People are saying, yes, there's more demand than this one station on South Essex can provide, because there's a lot of houses out there without driveways. So we looked at Marion Ave because it has a lot of the houses without driveways on Marion. The borough considered multiple sites at Marion for a charger, and staff identified a suitable location in front of a house with a driveway at 125 Marion, where the homeowner supported the use of electric vehicles. She already had her own EV and her own charger when the installation was made, but supported the general concept. So this is the last charger that's awaiting activation, since we're hearing, we've heard residents discussing that. Since the other residential chargers have been operational for several months, we've been able to see their usage, and they've been trending upwards. I look at those power bills every time I sign the checks, and I can tell you that electrical usage on those chargers is trending upwards. We received feedback from multiple people, like Ms. Skoprin, who spoke today, that don't have a driveway and have purchased an electric vehicle because of these residential chargers, or they are considering purchasing an electric vehicle, or they're considering the purchase. We've heard multiple people say that. So the program seems to be working as intended on the policy end. However, going forward, based on all the community concern, I think we need to be more transparent about the process. And I think the EAC has been considering that going forward. So, Mary, do you want to talk a little about what the EAC is working on now?
Sure, yeah. And so I just want to say that, we recognize because it's a pilot program, we are still kind of developing, we're considering the criteria by which we would, excuse me, evaluate the various aspects of use and then make recommendations to council based on that kind of, the pilot track record. So some of the things that we've been seeing in the very preliminary data from Flow, looking at the measures include, for example, how what percentage of each 24-hour period has a car there, how many different unique cars come, how many kilowatt hours are being, how much energy is actually being used. And then we're also just, again, this is preliminary, but we're throwing around ideas like implementing a policy so that when someone gets a residential sticker, if it's an electric vehicle, check a box, it's noted so that we can keep track of, we know anecdotally on our street, okay, well, the Perrys and then the Finkelmans, and then, we can see on our street, like on the 100 block of Marion right now, off the top of my head, I know there's at least 6 EVs, and some have their own chargers and some don't. But we would like to, we were saying that would be important to track, just, to try to establish, even if not cause and effect, a kind of, correlation, not causation of hopefully increasing adoption of electric vehicles. So our plan is to analyze the data from the chargers. I think we haven't decided fully, but what we've kind of thrown around, like what we've discussed, is a year. Like a year pilot is usually a kind of annual cycle. That 1 year from the turning on of each station, we kind of look and see what are these patterns, what do the data show, and then and make recommendations based on those. Another thing, and again, this is just like, part of our discussions is we would like to make a comprehensive map that shows what are the poles, what are their locations that actually are suitable for this, because I think this is also, one of the commenters mentioned, like, put it in front of the house where the people want it. And we were like, we'd love to have it in front of our house, but we don't have a pole, let alone a pole that's suitable. So really kind of mapping that out and developing a workable process. We're not focused on like, how do you mediate between neighbors on the same block that want, the opposite thing. That's something that we're not talking about as the EAC, but we are talking about, these measures and maybe new ones that come up that we would look at and develop, within the next few months, kind of develop a proposal for how we would evaluate the siting of the chargers, with the kind of assumption that it would take a year to see the patterns, and that's how far we've gotten. I guess one more thing I should just say is that we're looking at a lot of different studies that have been done in other countries, in cities versus suburbs. We've seen the kind of general research finding that's very robust by now is that you have to build the infrastructure first for people to then, feel comfortable buying the electric vehicles. But in terms of the specific policy process, it is a new kind of thing. So like we're kind of pouring over, for example, New York, a few neighborhoods in New York City have some policies and they've been playing around with a couple. So we're kind of trying to track municipalities that are similar enough to Narberth where we can see what they tried and what the results
not
were.
New York.
not Manhattan, Park Slope or whatever. So, there's various municipalities and we're kind of looking at them and like what challenges have come up, what have been the issues, some of like are different than around here, but that's where we are right now as a kind of status report.
Thanks. I can tell you that anecdotally, I looked at every power pole on the south side, and I think Rob did too. and neither of us found what we considered a more suitable location on the south side. So that is very limiting. However, we may, in the future, we may try to move beyond the power pole charger mentality. So I do want to talk a little more about process. So we are going to have other projects besides the chargers that are going to also involve the public right-of-way. I'm thinking of the stormwater bump outs in particular. We've already built several. However, we have an approved plan with the state of Pennsylvania that requires us to build many more. And as a result, we're going to have to cite those. The residents whose houses in front of are going to have the same concerns that we've heard from the last round of stormwater bump outs. So we need to have a kind of a process in place for picking those sites and allowing it to be a public process. So I think that in general, our process for these infrastructure projects, whether it be the chargers, the bump outs, or anything else that's comparable. So at a public meeting, council and staff work together to set the parameters for the location of the infrastructure. So it's basically the rules that we would use to choose the locations. And this would be also the committees could weigh in. So whatever recommendations the AC or I guess the infrastructure committee in the case of stormwater bump outs would have. So basically that would give staff their marching orders. And then borough staff would then use those parameters to identify potential sites. And then they would bring those to us at another council meeting. And they would say, here are the sites we've chosen. This is why we feel they meet these parameters. And council would give final approval for those sites. That's my proposed process for this going forward. As for the charger and Marion, I feel that we've explained the process that we used to get there. The parameters that we were using have also been explained multiple times. It's just it wasn't quite done formally. It was done informally, and at this point we've discussed this many times at public council meetings. So I would propose that we affirm the activation of the site on Marion, and then discuss sort of the general parameters going forward for other sites. So let's open discussion first of all for the site on Marion. Just affirming that we're going to turn it on. Me? I just talked a lot, so I'm sure.
I'm happy to. Yes, I'm in favor of activating the charter and moving forward and studying it, and it's a pilot program, and and I'm glad you mentioned the comp plan. It's an important element of our comp plan that deals with the greening infrastructure. I wanted to make an additional point that the green infrastructure is not just about reducing carbon and living a lower carbon style life. It's also about making our lives here in this borough possible, going forward. We are going to have to charge our cars, and we want our residents to have ease and several charging options. Regardless of what we do, going forward with public chargers, there will be many more chargers in the next 5-10 years that are private. That we should also come up with a way to enable and to work with residents about the charging infrastructure they might want to place in front of their houses.
And you don't have a driveway, right?
I can talk about myself. I do not have a driveway. I have an EV vehicle. I charge at the curb. I have no other option but to run a cable across the sidewalk. And that works for me. The other residents have approached me about wanting to do something different. There's a variety of ways that people want to get electricity across the sidewalk and to the street. And I feel when we come up with standards, we should be trying to enable pretty much all of them. I work with residents so that they can safely implement the infrastructure they want. And I feel the public chargers is part of the mix of options we want in our borough. Sometimes, I charge with, they call it trickle charge. It's just an outlet. I use the outlet on the front of my house. It takes forever. It takes days and days to charge a whole car that way. So sometimes I do use one of the level 2 public chargers. The nearest one to me is by the post office. It's a workable life for us, and we're enjoying it. So I recommend it, and I feel good about moving ahead with this one in particular.
I'll just go around the table.
Sure. I guess, I am concerned about the process that got us here. Obviously, I wasn't on council at the time of that process. I wish it had been done better from what I've heard, just in terms of transparency, and I think you said the word informative. But having said that, I keep looking to see, for me, whether a different process would have resulted in a different outcome. And I haven't heard anything that convinced me of that. In fact, it's just the opposite from what's been explained to me. Even if the process had been, whether you want to call it more transparent or more obvious, however you want to call it, I'm not convinced that the outcome would have been different. We should be distributing these across the community. I disagree that they should only be placed in commercial or in the downtown area. I think that, for the convenience of all our residents, over time, they're going to be populated across the borough. And I think that's inevitable. I heard concerns about data, and I think, I'm a data geek, so the only way you can get data is to turn the thing on and see what the data shows you. This is a pilot project, it's 1 year. If the data doesn't support the placement there, there's nothing that prevents us from removing it. Similarly, I heard concerns about criminal activity, but as far as I know, there's been no hint that this would create criminal activity, or that there's been any criminal activity around any of the pre-existing charters that are there or have been turned on, or in any other municipality. I actually tried to do just some Google searches to see if there was any connection to that. So that just seems speculative, bordering, and I don't want to cast aspersions, but bordering a little bit on fear mongering. So, I guess we can only go on terms of what we hear from the public, and it seems on that street, I've heard more people in favor of the project than against it, and I think all those factors make me feel in favor of activating the charter.
I don't know everything yet.
Okay, Michael? Yeah, I think, and I was glad to hear what you were saying, Miriam was saying in terms of taking an overall approach going forward to these assets. That's the type of policy process that makes the most sense to me. It's the one that I'm most familiar with from working in municipal government before. It's really common for municipalities to have these types of plans for even things like sidewalks, things that we wouldn't really expect. And it handles a lot of these discussions up front, I think. And then the process through which the decisions are made are clear to everyone. And so I was really glad to hear kind of you lay that out. And that's kind of the approach that I think we'll be taking going forward. And I think that addresses a lot of the concerns that I think everyone has raised regarding, there was a process in the past, but some of it was informal, and a lot of that clarity wasn't there. And in terms of the existing assets. I mean, they're Borough infrastructure assets, and we spent money putting them in there. We own them, and so yeah, in order to get pilot data on all of that, I think it makes sense that they should be turned on so we can get some of that data, and that'll help us with the policymaking process going forward.
I just want to reiterate what it's been said before, but the EV charger for EV vehicles are coming, and projections are saying by 2030 that 60 to 80% of all new vehicles are going to be electric vehicles. And what that means for Narberth, having residents who don't have driveways, is there's going to be a huge demand for this infrastructure, and we're either going to be prepared for it or we're not. So I support the residential curbside EV chargers. I just want to point out like 3 approaches moving forward. I think everybody is on the same page with this. Let's look at the data, and I think through the data we can address the concerns that have been brought up in terms of safety, in terms of utilization, in terms of even criminal activity, whatever it is. I think we can look at the data and use that data to inform our policy moving forward. And the other thing is communication and the process. Yeah, let's do better and learn from what was done before and improve on that and see how we can improve on that moving forward. And then finally, we need to be able to adapt. I really like Jim's idea about having other alternatives for allowing residents to be able to charge their vehicles in other ways. And I've seen, sidewalk channels with rates over them. If we have maybe we could have a permitting process that has a design guideline for exactly how it should be done, that in a very safe way, and so that could be something that we could also explore. Basically, the demand is going to continue to accelerate, the adoption is going to accelerate, and we're going to have to be prepared for it. So I support it.
Cindy?
No new points, but I support turning it on for all the reason you stated.
Okay. I guess we should have a quick vote on turning it on, unless it's not appropriate. Well, I don't know if it's not appropriate.
Resolution, not a.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to take a motion.
Okay.
I've got guidance.
All right, you have the guidance from council. I think the clear will of council is to move ahead with that project. Now let's talk about the process for a bit. So I said informality. Really, what I mean is probably that it was delegation. I mean, we, as council, we delegate a lot of the work to our professional staff. We don't want these meetings to be 3 hours long, so we'll approve the spending and we'll approve the general parameters of the project, and then our staff will take care of the final details. And it shows up as a consent agenda item, or it shows up as a line item on our statement of bills or something. So we don't get into the weeds on every single proposal that we make or every project. But I think that these, I hope that our manager and assistant manager agree that these projects have gotten to the level where council needs to make sort of a final approval of the sites, because the community obviously has interest in the process here. So, do you have any objection or comment to that process that I laid out for dealing with some of these infrastructure projects?
No, I am a process nut, as I've said publicly previously all the time. I appreciate the refocus on process, and thank you for providing guidance to the office. We've been in a holding pattern to hear. It was unclear to me as to what the will really was of council about the last one, and so thank you for providing that guidance to us. Moving forward, I am in support of increased processes. And
Even if they make the meetings longer?
well, sometimes,
Sometimes it's important.
it is, and depending upon what it is, there doesn't necessarily have to be, government runs slowly by design. This is taxpayer dollars, and we need to be careful with how we go about doing things, and I think we can be doing better in the future.
I do have a question. So this is just relating to novel infrastructure like the stormwater bump outs and the EV chargers, or is it any kind of infrastructure that we're putting in the public right away in front of people's houses?
I don't think we need to worry about signs, like, putting up a no parking sign or something. I mean, we're not going to publicly approve that.
Although
we should notify the homeowner probably.
We had an issue on our block because they decided to put up a no parking snow, and they put it in somebody's front yard. And he very much objected to that. And why are you putting this in my front yard? And it got moved 25 feet into the middle of our cul-de-sac, which made a whole lot more sense. So I would say even for signs, like there should be some consideration about where those signs are going and who's deciding that they need to go on.
I think major infrastructure projects such as stormwater bump outs, such as EV charging stations, that would require council interaction. I think day-to-day things like this, I think that's something that we can.
I'm not suggesting we need to vote on that. I'm just saying there should be a process for deciding.
Staff notifies the homeowner that it's going in. The council doesn't get involved in the citing of signs.
No. I'm not suggesting that we have to vote on the citing of signs. I will say literally, and it wasn't under Matt's tutelage, the homeowner walked out to find a sign stuck in his front yard with no notice. That's the problem.
I think there's another step, which is also notifying, people that their property is likely to be affected by whatever sign or whatever work that we're going to do. All right.
Yeah, so that was the one point I did want to make is that we could have avoided a lot of problems had we posted some signs, well in advance of doing the installation, because we incurred a fairly large expense in doing the installation. That potentially someone could come up with some consideration that we hadn't considered. That we hadn't thought about, I think in one of the other cases, it was potentially the only place they could put a driveway in the future or something like that. That might not have been obvious as part of the site evaluation. And so it just behooves us to let people, know we do it for,
for zoning,
we do it for trees.
Yeah.
As part of the tree planting, we say future home of trees. So I just think that, I know we've been through a lot of transitions and so on and so forth, but we did agree as a group, the group back then, that we would do such a thing, and we didn't do it. And so
maybe our staff can can come up with a proposal for notifying residents, or how you think the best way would be to notify people that this is a possibility.
Because I think
we are considering this site for this improvement, or we have slated this site for this improvement.
Because a big part of the impact on our constituents is they wake up one day and it's there.
Yeah, that was not.
So I think that at least we could, mitigate a little bit.
I think there is notification going on. I know, I've talked to Jeff Alvin in terms of public works project signage and things like that, and he actually hand delivers notices sometimes to the homeowners. There's just not a formal policy in place to make it consistent all across the board, and I think it would be helpful to have that.
So Jean and Ira, to your point though, we did kind of make a process to say that there would be both letters to the residents, and as well as Public Works would put out the signs with future borough projects. And that did happen for the speed hump. Just to let you know, we did learn from this EV. We did say this is going to be the new process. Neighbors did get letters telling them, right, informing them, not asking, informing them that this is where the council and the staff had determined. And we all got a letter, and there was a sign that just said borough project coming. So So that did happen, Ira, to your point, after the charger.
Good. And did it, I assume it went better? There was a positive effect of that?
Yeah, and I caution though, I said this before, I'm not an engineer. To your point, none of us can determine whether or not a Pico pole, for example, is appropriate. None of us are engineers to determine where stormwater runoff should go. And that's where I really lean on the expertise of our professional staff. I hope that, again, John String, for example, as Chief of Police and Director of Public Health and Safety, that he would eyeball and say, oh, actually, but there's an ADA spot there, or there's a van there, to bring in those data for us to all have that 360 view through Public Works and safety in the office. And then council, really our responsibility being notifying those neighbors, giving an opportunity to perhaps infusing a data point that the office may not have known as. But if we waited to get consensus on where critical infrastructure were to come, we would have none. And I hope that this clean process now does make meetings shorter, Fred, ultimately, because everyone knows what to expect.
All right. I see some support for this, so I don't know if we need to bring this to F&A down the line and just iron the process out, or if you think you've got clear enough instructions.
I've got clear enough instructions.
Okay, great. Any other discussion on this issue? All right, let's move on to 10B, which is an update from the Planning Commission. Mr. Bressi, thank you for bearing with us.
First, thanks for inviting me here. Second, it's just kind of cool to see a new council seated. Congratulations, everyone. It's my first visit to you all. I was asked to come and just give you an update tonight, primarily on 230 Havenford. Always happy to answer questions and anything else. First thing I'd like to say about this project is that working very closely with Matt West on the scheduling of things. We keep a rigorous schedule where we, as with the bridge, are keeping all of our commitments. And changes in schedule are pretty much due to the applicant needing to meet certain kind of requirements for submission. So an overview of the schedule at this point is that the Planning Commission will discuss this.
One second here.
Sorry about that.
No emergency here. Go ahead.
At our meeting next week, next Monday, the Planning Commission will discuss this application with a focus strictly on matters that are related to the conditional use application. As you recall, in addition to the land development application, there's a conditional use hearing and approval that is needed from council. Council's is scheduled to conduct that conditional use hearing on February 15th at its business meeting. Alan, I'm assuming that's correct because you said you updated the webpage and I'm reading from the webpage.
Yes. Yes.
Last we heard.
And that is the meeting at which, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, you'll work out any particular kinds of conditions you would like to place on the development. At our March meeting, we will focus on the preliminary / final plan application itself, all of the other matters that we need to consider. And if the information that's required is there, we'll be able to report back to council after that with whatever our recommendations are. And that means that as early as March 21st, at your business meeting, council can consider this voting on this application. That is the schedule that's laid out. We as Planning Commission are keeping to that schedule. And again, the only impediments I could see is that the applicant needs more time to prepare the required documentation for these reviews. There's nothing on our end that is slowing this down. The HARB also has a hand in this. The HARB is meeting on February 12th, and we'll discuss this project. I know that the chair of the HARB sent the staff and hopefully the council a brief update. What I'm not clear on, and I asked Dennis about this today, I don't believe the applicant has officially asked for a certificate of appropriateness yet. That request needs to be made so that that can formally be on the HARB's agenda to go through the process of voting on a certificate of appropriateness. Dennis told me that needs to be requested by the Borough zoning officer. I don't really know if that's the case, but that's a potential little hiccup that needs to be addressed. It's making sure the request for the certificate of appropriateness is appropriately placed on the HARB's agenda.
And that's good. They need to do that before you can approve the preliminary final plan or before we approve?
No, we can give an approval to play a contingent on the HARB, as the planning commission is, the HARB is the recommending authority. So the council ultimately grants that, right? So the HARB would recommend to you that a certificate of appropriateness should be offered. We can operate independently, procedurally. We can offer our recommendations and they can just be contingent on the HARB issuing its recommendations. Ultimately, that should all come to council at once, I would think.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we could approve, well, anyway, this is minor.
But, I mean, the way I read this, they better submit that application before February 12th. Because that's when the HARB is considering it.
Well, we can do our conditional use hearing without the certificate of appropriateness being granted. So ours is not contingent on that.
Yes.
We can't do our final approval without also, we can't approve this plan without also approving the certificate of appropriateness.
Right.
So we have to, the council has to approve that. So yeah, we'll need the HARB's advisory opinion before.
And so if you were aiming, that's the case for March 21st, one would hope the HARB in its February, March meeting would issue its recommendation to maybe it's.
Well, I mean, with NAPAC, do you know when the developer plans to submit their certificate of their request for a COA?
That would need to be coming up pretty soon.
I know, that's what we were just saying, so.
Yeah, they're aware of that.
Okay.
I believe, the conditional use application is the thing that's coming up first and foremost, which is in 2 weeks. That's the focus. My understanding, I don't know, sorry if I'm repeating things, or was that flooding emergency was dealing with?
No, but the HARB meeting is on February 12th, that's why it came up.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So for the conditional use hearing, I know that John Walco was preparing like a memo about, what a conditional, for new council members on what a conditional use hearing is and, how it's going to proceed and the sorts of things that are relevant in a conditional use hearing. So we'll be getting some information on that before the meeting. I can't remember the last time I was in a conditional use hearing. So
The elm. The elm.
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, 3 years ago.
So
it'll be useful refreshing.
So, as I've discussed with the borough manager, as I believe the borough solicitor would also say, that the discussion about the conditional use hearing should be narrowly focused on those items for which the applicant is seeking the conditional use approval, right? That's not every issue related to development. There are only certain issues that are related to conditional use. So at the planning commission meeting on Monday, we will focus on those issues. The applicant is seeking, if I'm correct, 2 conditional use approvals. One is under the green building provisions, and there will be an issue to discuss there. The green building provisions request that, if practical, on-site renewable energy be generated and provided. The applicant has proposed that the roof of the building be a green roof for stormwater purposes. In the public comment of the planning commission meeting, some people in the community asked why can there not be solar panels on the roof as the conditional use process encourages. So I think we will need to answer, or he will need to answer to your satisfaction, that a green roof for stormwater purposes is more viable than a green roof, than having solar panels on the roof. That will have to be explored. So that in terms, although he's agreeable to all of the provisions, that is an issue that will need to be discussed. We will discuss it and we'll report to you what we think. Second conditional use provision that needs to be considered is a provision for multiple buildings on the lot. The zoning code is written in a way you can only have one primary building on a lot. However, we have a provision that allows for more than one primary building on the lot by conditional use. That provision is in the code to allow for developments that might, say, for example, up at the end of Price Avenue where they have 9 townhomes that are like a condo on one lot, that allows for that kind of development to occur. And there's certain urban design provisions you have to meet. While technically that approval has to be given because he'll have 3 buildings on his lot, I don't see that there are really any issues raised by that. I think it's pretty straightforward process. So.
I mean, he's combining a bunch of lots into one. He's not putting up new buildings, right? I mean, well, sort of. He's taking down and like the number of buildings is not changing, right? Like it's just the configuration of the lot.
The number of buildings is becoming smaller. There will be fewer buildings.
Okay.
However, there will still be more than one building on the lot. And in order to do that, he'll require this conditional use approval. And when you read the requirements of that, he's met them all quite clear. He just needs to say that he's, so I don't think that is one that will generate any discussion. Then, any conditional use application has to meet some general requirements, and those are in a separate part of the code that just explains the conditional use process generally. And there are a few things there that will merit discussion. One of the provisions is that the conditional use is to comply with all other applicable criteria and standards of the Narberth Borough Code, which means it has to. That opens the gates. And I think there specifically, there's provision of the saldo that is related to facades that are more than 45 feet, which was passed in order for this development application to come in. They have not yet provided any documentation that they are meeting that provision of the saldo. So they will need to demonstrate that they are complying with that provision of the saldo. We will also ask the borough engineer, are they complying with the stormwater code? Because they've not yet provided their stormwater calculations to the borough engineer's satisfaction.
But that's going to be dependent on whether or not we accept their green roof, right? So, I mean, if we, well, I mean, I think they're likely to present you with something assuming that they have a green roof. Is that not? I mean, but that's assuming that you're going to accept, or you're going to recommend the green roof.
Well, first of all, they have to provide the calculations if the green roof works, which they
Correct.
So, at least last application, at least I've seen, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So they have to produce the package and defend it, right? That's essentially what they have to do. Yes, they're correlated, but if they come with a complete package and documented package, you can defend it. Here's why this is the preferred strategy, then we have the discussion and decide, right? So that's one of the provisions. And so those will be things we will discuss. And then the other is that the conditional use is harmonious and appropriate in design, character, and appearance with the existing or intended character and quality of the development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property or the physical characteristics of the subject property. That basically means it needs to be of the design needs to be harmonious and appropriate with the design of the surroundings. So what are how do we evaluate that? We will look to the compliance with the saldo, which has very clear prescriptions about the scaling of the architecture. And in this case, we will also look to the HARB. The HARB will be looking at this as well. And so I think the HARB is sort of can be a respectable voice on whether or not it's.
We had some flying. I think it has to be done.
I've been sitting there doing. So these will be the things that will come up in conditional use hearing. And these are narrowly related to the language of the code related to conditional use. I think if they, my honest opinion is, if they come with a fully formed package, it will be fine. But I think the real issues will be, are there gaps in the information that don't allow us to fully evaluate, what they're proposing. In addition, I know the Planning Commission has been considering requesting 2 conditions that are related to these provisions. These have been discussed at our meetings, and they've been circulated to council, and they've been circulated to the applicant. One of them is a condition under which the applicant would agree to construct the building as it was designed and approved. That is because the applicant did not do that with the 2 buildings the applicant is building down the street. And so essentially, this would create a process whereby during the construction of the building, if there's a deviation in the construction from the design of the building, that can be remediated at that time. We don't get stuck with a building that looks different from what we approved. I've discussed this application, this condition with the applicant. He's reviewed it. We've revised it to his liking, and so I'm hopeful that what we present and discuss will be agreeable, and we certainly want this to be a productive relationship, so that's why we've discussed it in our meetings and why we've discussed it with him. And so the second condition, which the Planning Commission has discussed, relates to green building. You'll recall when we passed the ordinance, we dropped a lot of ideas out of it because they did not seem to be enforceable. Things that were not so much about energy and more about construction practices, like using recycled materials or whatever. And so the condition that we've proposed, we've also given this to the applicant. We haven't had any feedback on it yet. So I hope on Monday we will discuss it, is that the applicant will consider a range of sustainable construction techniques, tell us which ones he feels he can incorporate into his project, and agree to do the ones he believes he can do. I think it's a very low bar to pose, but it's simply just sort of asking the applicant to consider these things, tell us if any are feasible, and if any are feasible and he's willing to do them, then the condition is he would do them. So that is the second condition that the Planning Commission, again, we've discussed it at our meetings. I think we discussed it at 2 meetings, if that's correct, and we've circulated it. And so we'll see what his reaction is, because he has not commented on them yet. So those are 2 conditions that the Planning Commission will ask the applicant about and could potentially recommend to you to consider, when you are considering the conditions you would like to make. So that's the conditional use process. I think it's important to flag a couple of issues, although again, we will not focus on them in the hearing, in our review in February. A couple of other issues that would need to be resolved in future meetings. One has to do with the request for a waiver of the traffic impact study, which we haven't discussed much, but I think that traffic impact studies are kind of an artifact of auto-centric planning and culture, and so they don't really have much utility in Narberth. If you're developing a football stadium or a shopping mall or a megaplex, a traffic study makes sense. If you're developing even a project of this scale, the the traffic impacts are impossible really to measure. I remember, if you remember the conversations we had with 3 Elmwood and the traffic studies they were having, you know, they'll generate 6 cars an hour. But I think there are circulation issues that are really important to our community. How easy is it to bike around a place or to access a place by bike? What is the pedestrian network like? Are there safety issues that will be created by whatever the volume of cars is? Or are there safety issues in the area that ought to be remediated because we will be relying more on that infrastructure for biking and pedestrians? That's the kind of study that we need. Or that's the kind of discussion at least that we need. I think that, so that will be an issue that we'll want to discuss. I know several council members raised these specific questions in our planning commission meeting. When we had public comment, these were the issues in the minds of council members. So I think in your own minds, you might think about how you would like to approach that. What is a reasonable conversation to have? Like perhaps participate in that March Planning Commission meeting to help us arrive at a solution to that. As of now, as far as I know, the stormwater calculations have not yet, final calculations have not yet been submitted to Eric Johnson, if he's around, he might know better. A lighting plan has not been provided, the open space dedication mechanism has not been provided. I think there's still some questions about bicycle improvements. And then a technical thing, but the parking calculations do not include potential parking demand that would be, or parking, do not take into account the parking requirements of other properties that would be using the parking lots. So when we ask the applicant about how the parking is calculated, he explained how it is worked out satisfactorily to serve for the parking lot behind, the buildings, to serve those buildings. But that parking lot, in his own, description to us, will also serve the former Little Gym building and the building on the corner that is not part of this development, and he's not included those parking numbers in his calculations. Obviously, he will rely on that lot for the parking for those buildings when he seeks the permitting for those buildings. So I think the parking calculations ought to accurately reflect, because that will only give us the true picture of what is, what parking is related to the properties and what parking is open, is potentially open to the public. So I don't think this is an issue about the development. I just think it would be good for him to document it fully and clearly. Those are the things that will come up, I think, in future meetings. So that is where we are on it. I will rest my case.
Councilmembers? Questions?
We'll just again continue to focus your energies on the conditional use part of it, because my expectation is that the applicant is going to be submitting updated plans soon thereafter. So many of these things, there were significant findings from the engineer that they will be addressing many of those things. And my take is that they will be addressing many of the things that Todd has discussed also. So I just don't focus a lot, keep it in the forefront, but don't focus a lot of your energies on that, because the plan is expected to change when they submit an updated submission soon after the conditional use.
I have a few comments. Have you checked with Solicitor Walco on the reusable material or the sort of sustainable practices condition that you've recommended, or that you're thinking about?
Well, it's been circulated to him, but we haven't directly discussed it.
Okay. I think we should make sure we have his opinion on the suitability of that condition. I know he's talked about the other condition, which grows out of prior concerns with the buildings that we've seen from this developer. Entirely appropriate given the history.
And it's related to, I'm careful to be, it's actually related it is a condition that's related to a provision in the code now, which says that the plan development shall be properly designed with regard to parking lot design, blah, 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 energy efficiency, and similar considerations. And so this is a similar consideration to energy efficiency. So I think that it also has to be in accord with the borough's comprehensive plan and its implementing or supporting plans and policies. And so,
well, we should
I think
still run it
this is
by.
a condition that is fair game, according to the zoning code.
All right. I would suggest that if you feel that the traffic study provision, which we just added to our code, is not really suitable for Narberth, that maybe a couple months down the line, you give us a recommendation to amend it or to change that so it's no longer a requirement, because that's expensive. And if we don't think a developer should do it for Narberth, then something else should
The
be in
legislative
there.
history of that is we recommended keeping it like for future use, and at the last minute, I think the borough engineer and the MCPC agreed to put something in there to not have it be empty. You can always waive that requirement if you feel it's unreasonable, but having it in there forces the conversation, as opposed to having it say reserved for future use.
All right.
And so we do intend, Mr. President, at some point to produce what you're requesting.
Okay, I mean, it's not here. I mean, my final comment is about the upcoming meeting, which is, I listened to the last meeting, which was very focused on the aesthetics of the building and how funky it was. And I think that, it's important to make sure that the technical aspects, like the stormwater, are in line. I hesitate to, I don't want to have a huge discussion at the conditional use hearing about how well this building fits into the aesthetic of the streetscape, just because I see that taking forever and just being extremely subjective. And the conditional use hearing is supposed to be very objective. Like, does it fulfill this condition, yes or no? Whereas, I have concerns about that as being like a significant topic during the conditional use hearing. So, I don't know how to operationalize
the
that.
last one
Yeah,
where,
the last meeting just really went off the rails.
but I remember that at the very beginning, I think it's important to explain the limitations of what a hearing is and that we as council have the power to do or not do within that hearing. It's not about this thing.
Well, I think.
I just don't relish council having to sit and weigh in on whether this fits into the streetscape. Because it's not our thing. We're not trying to do this.
We will have recommendations from the HARB and from the planning commission to rely on.
Well, I also just don't want it to take all planning commission's time instead of, I think the stormwater is like an urban issue. We need to be certain that they've got that dealt with. And, some of these other issues that you're talking about seem extremely significant to me. And I want to make sure that they're dealt with.
That will be at our March meeting.
I thought you said that was a conditional use topic.
Well,
that they could give you
I think doesn't that get solved by the condition that you're building the building in accordance with the plans that were approved, right?
No, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Well, to me, you get, if there's a condition at the conditional use hearing that the plans that are approved is the way that the building gets built, that I think answers the rest of the questions about the architecture, the layout, those types of things. Assuming that those things are in the plan set, right?
Yeah. I would like to respond to Fred's question, Mr. Bush's question. I see what your question is. The question, that the conditional use hearing raises is whether there should be renewable energy generation through solar panels on the roof, because we say if possible you should do that, right? And so in order to do that, the applicant is going to have to say in order to have a green roof, the applicant is going to have the stormwater plan in place to be able to say, or some justification as to why a green roof is better than solar panels. I've had long conversations with the applicant about this. He has other reasons. I don't think it's my place to tell you tonight what they are. It's his place to tell you what they are, why he wants to have the green roof. So, but I don't think that an exhaustive investigation of the stormwater will be what we talk about in our meeting in February. That is something we might focus on that narrow question, but the whole stormwater system, I think, is something we would look at in March. We're following the code. I mean, I'm very careful to pull out the parts of the code that I think are relevant to this conversation.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Brett? Aaron?
So, it seems like a key, I mean, other than the stormwater, which, I'll just say that, I'm sure that it relates to his desire not to build underground because, like, there are risks associated, and there's financial risk associated with that. So I understand why he might not want to do that. But my question is, this goal to have him kind of build what is drawn, to actually build the design. You said he was amenable to that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he gets that that's going to become a condition, but what recourse do we have if he doesn't actually do that?
Well, it's outlined in the draft condition. And first of all, you'll have your chance to ask him these questions.
I know, but I'm trying to ask an informed question. So.
Oh, I understand. I just don't. I'm just trying to make sure that no one feels like this is a decision point right now. It's not. It's something, and you can ask him about it. Enforcement is that the hope that everyone would have is that the variation could be addressed, right? I mean, that's what everyone wants. The enforcement mechanism is that the applicant would place funds into an escrow account, which would only be released when the building is complete in accordance with the design. So it's like a performance bond.
So it's financial.
Yes.
But that doesn't compel him to actually build it that way. He just would lose money if he did.
Right. This really, the only other thing we conceived of was that a certificate of occupancy could be denied. Mm-hmm. But Kevin Walsh advised us that those are not grounds. Like,
yeah, but it's not even to our advantage. I mean,
no one wants that.
I mean, that's where we are now, right?
No one wants that. So the point is not to get there. Yeah. Right. The point is, the real point is to have a situation where if someone looks at the building and says, you didn't put that ornamental trim at the top of your building, like you said you were, and that ornamental trim is something that the harbor approved to make this acceptable, to be able to say, all right, and we're going to kind of figure out why that is and see if it can be remedied. And this is actually one of the parts of this whole process that the applicant was helpful on. He said, we have these Friday construction coordination meetings with the borough, right? And so what I would agree to is if anyone sees something that they think is amiss, it is raised at one of these Friday construction meetings, and we address it with the borough, why that occurred, what the remedies are, And so instead of letting it becoming a big issue on Fridays, they would assess these things that they're observing and come up with a plan for dealing with it. So it just gives the borough a little more of a standing to be able to say during the construction process. Because right now, like we've talked to Kevin Walsh about this, he's like, but what am I supposed to do? I don't, I can't issue a stop work order on a building because he didn't put metal work in. I mean, no one wants that to happen, right? You can't deny them a certificate of occupancy. No one wants that to happen. So what's he going to do? So this is kind of works out of protocol. If there are features of the building that aren't built as approved, then when that is, when that comes to light, it's addressed in these coordination meetings, and if ultimately it doesn't happen, it's a escrow that's lost. The building continues, it opens up, it's tenanted up, and the loss is the escrow funds.
Will that extend to the facing of the building?
Basement?
The facing of the building.
Yeah, it would be to public visible facades. Yeah.
So he's gonna submit detailed plans about the facing.
The
We can hold it.
The approval of this project will require the approval of architectural renderings. The HARB has to approve them to issue the certificate of appropriateness. They also have to be approved to comply with the SALDO. So we've made it very clear. Now, and this was a big point of discussion. Is like, if one brick is off by 10% in shade, no one wants to make an issue of that, right? So we actually have in this condition the things that could be, dealt with, right? We don't want de minimis things to. We don't want to be the police in that sense. And we reviewed this with the applicant. So there's like 7 bullets. Exterior wall materials and colors. So it changes the color, changes the material. Stonework features like cornices, lintels, sills. Like you left some of the stonework features off the building 100, right? So that would be something we would catch. Landscaping, leaving landscaping out, different lighting fixtures, metalwork features like Juliet balconies, exterior ranges, exterior railings, those are the kinds of things we're talking about. Those kinds of features. They're listed.
So, then, the other thing that people are so frustrated about with these projects is that, it's almost like spring 2024 and the sign says spring 2023. Do we have any control over that, or is that hard to negotiate as well?
That has come up with the Planning Commission. We've discussed it. I have discussed that with the solicitor, what the possibilities of that, and there is a mechanism that Borough could use. Like I have to go back to my email exchanges with the solicitor, but it would pretty much amount again to a performance bond that would be forfeited if the building isn't completed on time. Although that was brought up the Planning Commission, I don't see the same kind of
passion
for that. I hope if you've talked to the applicant about that building, almost everything that could go wrong went wrong, and were things that were not in his control. And so I think, like in a practical, real world sense, the last thing you want to do is being depenalized because of the things that happened there. But there is a mechanism. The solicitors outlined it. I can forward that information to you. If you like.
Right, but what you're getting at is that, like, depending on who you believe, some of it may be out of his. There's certainly a possibility that the delays will be out of his control, and yet he would be responsible for, a financial penalty. So he's going to be less likely to. Like this other thing with putting the right finishes on, that's completely within his control.
And his contractor's control.
Right.
Yeah, and he has an incentive maybe to cut corners, but he doesn't have an incentive to drag out the project for.
Right.
So
the cost of not finishing a project on time is greater than almost any penalty we can impose.
Yeah. Okay.
Not leasing a building for 2 years.
Yeah. Well,
when you're carrying the loans.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense to me, but yet here it is.
But you know what, Ira, I do think it it behooves us to say publicly, Tim started this project, the developer, and then COVID hit. And every supply chain hiccup that could have happened on those two properties. He's been now waiting for months for these switch gears where there's a national deficit, and nobody wants those projects done more than the applicant. This is not, oh, I forgot to order something, or, oh, I'm distracted with another project. I think it's important for the community and council to understand. I think this was just a series of really unfortunate events. And post-pandemic, Michael, I know you and I have kind of talked about the funding that goes with this and how radically that funding has changed. This was really not a result of poor planning, excuse me, folks, on his part.
Okay, well, I was just asking the question.
The answer is there is a mechanism, but it doesn't seem reasonable.
Well, I listened to the answer. So.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Russell.
Well, thank you all for your time this evening.
All right, final item, well, okay, announcements, but we've got committee reports. So, infrastructure.
Well, I mean, I could give you a report, but we discuss nearly every meeting at night, so it doesn't really make any sense.
All right, finance administration.
All right, finance administration has met once this year. On January 19th, we have spent most of the time, or most of the agenda is due to budget review for 2023. Additionally, the manager circulated a draft of the capital improvement list that's being drafted and being assembled. This is a list of anticipated purchase needs over the next 5 years and ranked low, medium, high. And I honestly don't know whether council's put them together recently. But
not in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So this should be a useful document for anticipating budgetary needs and that we don't have surprises going forward. How long is that draft going to take? When do you think we'll... Good question. The way I envision it is to start the conversation in infrastructure, cross-pollinate with finance and administration. Staff is just about ready for committee review. Committees will then start looking at it, and once the committees believe that it's at a point where it's ready for showtime, they'll come to full council. I will present to full council about what it is. You'll have an opportunity to interact with it, let it marinate for a month, and then hopefully end game is for council consideration to adopt in July. That's the target. That's for a comprehensive 5-year capital improvement plan. So we anticipate mostly focusing on the finance aspect of F&A and sort of gradually easing into the administration part, and that's partially due to allowing the office to develop their staff and capacity. So kind of taking it easy. However, next month, is it okay to mention anticipated next month? Okay, this is a pet topic of mine and it's kind of prescient. And it has to do with council meeting procedures as relates to communication technology. And just as a background to that, we have 2 things in the council room now that we never used to have 10 years ago. We record the meetings on the video and we make them available on YouTube. And anybody can watch them whenever they want, whether it's a council or other meeting participant getting up to speed, a meeting they may have missed or review, or members of the public who want to watch meetings that they have not been to. We record meetings, and also we have Zoom now. Since the pandemic hit, we switched to Zoom. We had entirely Zoom meetings for a while. When we emerged from the pandemic, we kept this hybrid meeting structure. All of this is kind of snuck in on us with no policy. So there are our expectations from meeting participants and the public that we need to get straight. Like, for instance, we have
remote council people participating tonight are one, what happens if she were to disappear, from the meeting? If the technology went out, and we had votes scheduled, what would we do? I'm not sure if we have expectations, let alone procedures for that. What happens, it's been a long time since a meeting has not got recorded, and I feel like we need to have contingencies in place for that in terms of maybe backup recordings or audio recordings. There's a lot we could talk about coming up with procedures just to set expectations about how meetings progress with what we have now.
Thanks. And you should take a look at the rules of council. So we have an official rules of council document that's online, lives on the Borough website, and it should be on SharePoint. But that would be a good place to address these concerns. We can write them into the rules of council.
But some of it's governed by the Borough Code, which basically says that you have to have an in-person quorum.
Right. Sure. Oh, absolutely. But as we learned at our orientation, so we do need an in-person quorum to start a meeting, but the remote participants can be used to maintain quorum.
So that's nice.
Yeah. Well, that was the advice we were given. I think I would want to get Mr.
We'll
Walker
have
to
to talk
give
to John
us
about that, but yeah,
his own
that was
view of
interesting.
that.
So there are a lot of little quirks like that.
So Cindy could have just like showed up, started
Yes.
it, and then gone home.
In theory, that's what they said. I'm not completely
But
buying
to be
it.
clear, you need to have a physical quorum, so you need to at least have 4 of you here in person.
That's not what he's saying.
Start with
You
four
have
and
to
then
start that way.
Okay.
That's what, yeah.
Okay, these are the kind of things we're going to clear up, so.
I agree with you.
It's very
Yeah, it
complicated.
didn't make sense to me, Alan, when they told us this, and I thought to myself, yeah, I'm not sure I would take that chance, to potentially vote on something that ended up not being
They
lawful.
probably require the physical quorum in case there's technical issues, right? Yeah.
It seems like a best practice.
No, I just-
No, it's because the Republicans are jerks and don't
We're still on the record
COVID
here.
mitigation records. I want to record with it. That was just a jerk move.
Okay,
They're
whatever.
really uncalled for when they change those rules.
Okay.
Thanks. Anything else? No? Okay. Sorry to derail the conversation. Pet peeve of mine. Public health and safety.
Yes, public health and safety met January 12th. We reviewed the goals and priorities for the year. EAC provided an update. The main thing is CCA, Community Choice Aggregate. That program is waiting for feedback from the PUC. And so we're in a holding pattern there. And they spoke today about starting to look at the EV charger usage data as well and comparing with other municipalities. The PEAC is working on a report. We're looking at maybe like a March timeline for that report to be ready. From the police, they're working on just improving and strengthening our existing platforms for communication, including Everbridge, through the newsletter and MyGov, and also looking at bike patrol courses to start the bike patrol up again, possibly looking at starting for summertime. And then from the fire department, actually tried to go to the fire drill, and at the very same time they had a real fire building call, so it was canceled. We're probably looking at March for like a rescheduled fire drill. And they're having a board meeting actually on Monday, February 5th. And the main thing from the fire department was that they're planning on selling one of their fire engines, the oldest fire engine, and decommissioning their car, which is a very old car that was transferred from the police department. It's been around for ages. And they're purchasing and using those funds to purchase a new electric car for the fire department to use. And I think that was it from public health and safety.
You just mentioned that the high school walk zones are going to be expanded significantly into Narberth, so a lot of our high school students will now not have busing. And I think it's appropriate for us to try to somehow liaison with the school district to
Yeah,
ensure
thanks
that
for
our
mentioning
kids,
that, yeah.
and I offered to do that, to reach out to members of the school board just to make sure that, you know, if there are places where there are health or safety issues in these expanded walk zones that.
But it would even be as from Lower Merion to parts of North Narberth?
1.5 miles.
It's expanding from 1 to 1.5 miles.
And that does it.
If you go,
It's all of North Narberth.
it's almost all, it's all of North Narberth, and shockingly, it actually extends over the tracks into parts of South
It's
Narberth.
almost like the entire borough.
Yeah, it's a very significant part of the borough. I have separate concerns about traffic because I suspect on rainy and cold days, all these people aren't going to be bused. If any of you went to Harrington, you know, sometimes that line down that road. And so I want to make sure the police are aware of that. We might need to alter traffic.
Is this for like cost savings or?
Because of
the
start times
are changing in
They're-
September.
And kindergarten and full day kindergarten.
Full day kindergarten.
So they just don't have the stock of bus and bus drivers.
Correct. Correct.
So related to that, like I just want to also remind the community that February 5th is, I think, when the active transportation, Lower Merion and Narberth active transportation survey closes. So if there's any feedback about safety concerns, pedestrian connections, bike connections between from here in Narberth to Lower Merion High School, please
put it in there.
Yeah, put it in the survey and provide your feedback.
What was that date?
I think it's February 5th. I have to double check.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in terms of the school district change. I mean, I would love for them to, you know, work with us on a grant application for safety improvements for people walking to school. If they're going to go ahead and change those rules, you know, more crosswalks, more sidewalks, whatever. Right? You know, so if you're going to reach out to them, that would be you know, a way for them to take some responsibility for the decision.
If everybody's
to work with us.
If everybody's cool with it, as for me being the point of contact, I know a lot of folks on the school board.
Sounds good.
Can you imagine a lot of the high school kids are going to ride bikes now to school?
Well, that's the question.
We'll find out.
I think we want to incentivize it.
Right.
I mean, that's
Do they have
the goal.
appropriate places to?
They have bike racks, but it's a little bit, in my opinion, it's hidden and in a very poor location.
Oh, so it could be stolen.
They have a giant campus. They can put bike racks.
Yeah, it's just a question of, you know, again, incentivizing, making it attractive, you know.
No, but I mean, they should have.
They should have some more bike racks. There's another ask for it.
Yeah.
Put in more bike racks.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like something fancy.
But if you know, if you've gone over to Harrington, I mean, it is a nightmare in the morning. It's down whatever that road is, you know, you could sit in traffic on Ithan for 20 minutes if you hit it wrong to get all the kids into the school. And,
I do that pretty often.
I mean,
Montgomery's pretty high volume.
Correct.
I don't think they're gonna.
No, it's a question of getting to Montgomery, making, you know, if they're coming out of North Narberth and you're making the left turns onto Montgomery, you know, by the synagogue or the next street over, like, those tend to have issues.
All right, so when does the change goes into effect in the fall?
In the fall.
Yeah, so
What's the
ready
new
to
start time, though? I just don't know anything about
For high school, it would be about 8:30.
Okay, so.
Middle school is 8. And actually, can we put the survey out in the newsletter tomorrow? That goes out tomorrow again.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, we're good.
Thanks, Gene. That's the last one.
Oh, and actually, sorry, that's the first one. Okay, so first, can I give a quick Parks and Rec update? So the Narberth Park basketball court light hours, the Parks and Rec board approved the policy to set hours to 9:30 p.m. From May 1st to October 31st. And to 8 p.m. from November 1st to April 30th. And then the borough staff can adjust the hours earlier at their discretion on an as-needed basis if issues arise. And then if the staff adjust the hours, staff will ensure a process that will include documenting and bringing the issues forward to the Parks and Rec board for further review. So if there's an issue, the staff can adjust the hours, but then they'll bring it to Parks and Rec after to review. And then staff will prepare that policy in the form of a resolution for council to approve at the next meeting.
So I was going to bring it to the the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting, the next one, a draft resolution that we can all review, and then either make a recommendation, make edits to it, and then make a recommendation for council consideration.
Okay.
It should be next Friday.
Yeah.
Is the bathroom closing thing also on the public health and safety? Okay.
Is I guess the skate park is probably closed. They probably closed it for the winter at this point after the snow.
Yeah, so the board approved the policy to close the bathrooms for the winter season from December 1st to March 31st.
That's what the skate park.
The skate park.
So
there wasn't enough. So they were able to reopen it.
We keep it open so long as the court surface is dry.
Right.
Yeah.
And do we have to re-up on that thing, or we can just extend the pilot, or lack of action extend the pilot?
To me, it seems more permanent at this point.
Parks and Rec didn't make, we were kind of expecting them to make some kind of a recommendation at some point. They never really got around to it, so we can poke them again.
I mean, eventually there'll come a time where we need to decide if we're gonna, redo the entire surface and make it like.
Well, that's going to be part of the master plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We could ship out some of the stuff that's in there and replace it with some of our other metal stuff. There's options.
So, so like I said, in terms of the bathrooms, they approved the policy to close them for the winter season. That will also be.
Yeah, I was going to include that in the same resolution.
And the park user meeting is set for March 13th. And then Rebecca Moore and I will prepare remarks to update them on the master park plan process to make sure that they're included as stakeholders. And then a quick master parks plan update. The RFP was put out to bid on January 4th, and it was sent out to 7 design consultants who were selected by the study committee. The study committee reviewed the criteria for selecting the design consultant. And then we may schedule a special meeting on February 6th at 6 p.m. for the committee to review the submitted proposals. And then we may potentially schedule a second special meeting, February 12th, for an oral presentation if needed. And then the study committee will make the final review and vote on the consultant selection recommendation on February 14th.
But that,
and
special here.
Council consideration on the 15th. So that's why it's moving fast. It closes tomorrow at 11 a.m. We have received 2 submissions so far. And then as soon as it, really hopefully in the afternoon, the responses will be circulated to the Master Park Plan Committee for review.
And it does look like we're receiving what is the minimum 3 responses.
Yep.
So I think we're
staying in good graces with the state.
Yes.
Oh, that's the state thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was federal. That's great.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's good. It's good practice.
It's good to have 3 anyway.
If we would only have 2, if we had in writing that the other ones, we're not gonna submit, that would satisfy the state. But yeah, it's good to have 3. So. Good.
All right. Thank you, Gene, and good luck with all the special meetings. Any announcements for the good of council?
Fred, I just want to announce that the new trash schedule starts next week.
Oh yeah, Tuesday.
Oh, you mean that too? Thank you, Andrea. It's very good to know. So the new trash schedule is trash on Tuesday. The brush pickup on Wednesday, recycling Thursday. Yeah, garbage on Tuesday.
Garbage is the only thing that's changing. Everything else stays the same, but garbage goes from Fridays to Tuesdays starting next week.
And we will be reminding everybody of this change.
Okay.
Repeatedly.
That should be an email, probably.
It should be an email, it should be Facebook post, it should be multiple emails.
Can we put in the Narberth by the train station too? Maybe a poster or something?
So we've been putting it in the newsletter every week.
I know,
continue to
but
do
not
that.
everybody basically.
Yes. Physical print
Yeah.
signs. Yeah, we got a couple of those. There's one at the library, there's one at the post office, and there's the one at the train station.
The trouble is, sometimes when you see something every week, you stop seeing it.
Yeah, I agree. You just scroll through it. Can we do a unique social media post? On the
Yeah, I think we should just do
I mean, but the good news is if you miss it, they're picking it up like tomorrow, right?
No.
So it'll only be like 10.
Yeah, good point, Ira.
You're picking it up tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's not like you missed 2 weeks. It would be like, 8 or 9 days.
10 days, yeah.
It's cold out.
We also went through the borough calendar, made sure all the dates were right, so all the collection days are properly listed. We did all the holidays, so whatever's on the website and the calendar is accurate.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, Cindy, did you have something, an announcement? No? All right, someone brought up that one of our council meetings is scheduled on Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, here we go.
Right, so which date, that's the November meeting?
Wouldn't be November.
September or October.
Would be September or October.
Okay, well, sorry.
Just let you know.
Apologies.
In
So
November.
we're gonna need to change that date, so it's not on Rosh Hashanah.
Apologies for missing that.
Well, we all missed it. Usually we try to.
It's just that we had like an incident last year.
Yeah. So, why don't you guys propose a new time for that meeting? I guess.
Well, if it's September, we don't even have it. I don't know.
We only have a business meeting in September typically.
Is this October?
It's October 3rd.
October 3rd, okay. So we
So
want to move
that's-
it.
that's
How long
actually-
does Rosh Hashanah extend? Is it just?
2 nights, so.
Which way?
Second and third, I believe. So that was a month where we had an extra week, so we could actually move both meetings down a week. So it'd be instead of the first and third, it'd be the second and fourth. Because we have 5 Thursdays in October.
All right, why don't you circulate that in an email, we'll make sure everybody's good with it. But for now, we'll make that change. Okay.
If you're making that change, just double check Yom Kippur.
Yep.
Jim's on.
Yeah.
Right now? Yeah. We can double check that.
We'll check, all right, the office will check it, so we'll circulate that email. Thank you for that point. All right, I think that's it for announcements. We do not have an executive session after this meeting, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All right, all those in favor of adjourning? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, folks. Have a good one.
Hold on.